In terms of the agenda of this webinar, we'll keep the interview extremely short, 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll jump into a Q&A. About me, I started coding when I was 15. So far, I've launched 4 startups. 2 have spectacularly failed. 2 have been a success so far. I spent half of my professional career building startups and thinking of creating value for customers. The other half I spent working on websites and apps for Fortune 500 companies. Before I co-founded Mentorcam, I was doing contracting for Lamborghini America.
Okay.
Jake?
All right. So then let's just jump in. So in the case of Mentorcam particularly, what was the biggest mistake that you made when planning Mentorcam's MVP?
Yeah, so let me go in a chronological order. The single biggest mistake I've done is that I didn't talk to customers enough before I went into planning and development. Let me give you guys kind of a super high level story about my thinking process was. Like I mentioned, I'm a developer, a little bit of a geek, and I really don't like when I'm being bothered by friends or anyone else on via chat, WhatsApp, text, whatever it is. And I was thinking, can I build some kind of a communication platform where it's only meaningful conversation? And the thinking process was that, well, okay, each and every message should be paid, because if people has to pay again, like we did back in the old texting days, then suddenly people would not waste one another's time. So the main idea was that I wanted to create a platform where the communication is more efficient, more meaningful. I came to the conclusion that in one way or another, one party should pay for it. And then kind of narrowing down this thinking, I came to the conclusion that people would be willing to pay for talking to someone as long as they get advice, that they get real value out of the conversation. And then I was thinking, well, when was the time when I got value and it was extremely impactful in my life? And the conclusion I came to is that basically it was through mentorship. I was lucky to have an amazing coach, an amazing mentor when I was younger, and he was, they were, I would say, the 2 of them, they were extremely influential. So the idea of Mentorcam was born. I wanted to do something with mentorship and paid communication. But because back in 2020, well, just like today, influencers were kind of taking over our time, I would say, and our attention. So I wanted to do something with influencers. It is just that I completely ignored the fact that I was not and I am not an influencer. So I made a number of different major assumptions about my target audience. And I started developing and building Mentorcam in a way that I definitely should have not. Now, one thing I validated, which was the demand side. I knew that there were many people wanting to talk to influencers and they were willing to pay a certain amount of money for it. It is just that I did not know that influencers did not want to quote unquote waste their time responding to DMs. And we basically spent 1 year, the first year of Mentorcam, targeting influencers and trying to make them do something that they were just not that enthusiastic about. So the big learning, if I could go back in time, I would talk to a bunch of influencers and I would invalidate my main assumption of them willing to give advice on a message per message kind of base. Now, there is also this advice that I can definitely recommend to all of you, which is that if you should be passionate about the problem that you're solving, and you can be passionate about the problem if you're experiencing it yourself. It is just that question yourself whether you're really and truly the target audience who you would want to attract when it comes to developing your MVP. Yes, the first and biggest mistake, not talking to customers.
Great. So then how did you end up doubling your timeline and budget like of your MVP once you actually started getting it going?
Yeah, so I would say there are two main categories here, I think. Technical founders and non-technical founders. I was a technical founder, and I felt like I could just change the world through code if I just put the extra hour in, or if I hire an extra outsourcing partner, I can ship more faster. It is just that I didn't need to ship a lot of things that I ended up wasting time on. Why? Because I didn't talk to customers and then I was building the wrong things. But when it comes to actually developing my MVP, I made the mistake of like outsourcing some of the stuff that I could have learned or I could have done, hoping that I would fast track my development. And as a founder, you care most about your startup and your product. So inherently, you would be kind of never be happy with the outcome when it comes to someone else building something major for you in such kind of early days. And the other aspect of it is that you have to iterate early on. And in order for you to iterate, the best person who you can rely on is yourself. So the mistake I made, I outsourced, even though I was a technical founder, hoping that I would fast track things that I should have done, or I outsourced things that I could have learned. The advice I can give to non-technical founders is that even though you cannot build, most likely if you're building a software-based startup, most likely you won't be able to build the full set of your product, but you can make sure that when it comes to user experience and planning, you really own it and you are on your own resource. Learning Figma and learning how to create a main technical specification is not rocket science. Get your hands dirty and make sure you have spec'd out what you want to see on the screen. Like I said, talk to customers, do the design and specs yourself, or at least the wireframes, and only then go out and either find a developer or a company to build the first iteration of your product.
So then what were things that you'd say you got right? Because you talked a lot about these fails that tend to doom a lot of startups. I mean, there are plenty of startups that fail before they even launch a product, or they come up with a product that never really finds its fit. And they blow a lot of cash that way. So how did you get it right, and how do you maintain that momentum?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say the number one thing that I got right was that I really had a kind of a shipping mindset. I knew I wanted to ship something, even though I was somewhat embarrassed about the state of the product. But the rule is that if you're not embarrassed about your product, it's already too late to launch it. So in this case, I kind of went against my basic technical founder instinct, and I had something something ready to go. Not in 3 months as my planned timeline, but in 6 months' time, I had something solid to go. So that was number one, shipping mindset. Number two, I realized that one aspect of my product is something I don't want to, the skill I don't want to acquire, not even short term or long term. So I recruited my lead engineer, who's been with Mentorcam ever since, and that was that took me a year, almost a year, to recruit him and to convince him to leave his existing job. But that investment of my time paid off so much. He's been extremely reliable, driven, motivated. And yeah, when it comes to recruiting your core team, it's, in my opinion, it's never a waste of time to make these investments of finding them, recruiting them, hiring them, and keeping them motivated. The third thing that I did, which is somewhat related to recruiting my lead engineer, was finding my co-founder. Even though my MVP was progressing, but slower than I wanted to, but I was making progress, I knew that I kind of don't want to, and I should not launch without finding my co-founder. The previous startup I did was I did it as a solo founder, and it is definitely something I do not recommend to anyone, because you need to take all the pain all the time. At least if you have a good co-founder, you're only taking 90% of the pain all the time. The fourth thing that I got right was that I didn't worry about things that I did not have to worry about in that time period. Let me give an example. When we launched Mentorcam, we were relying on in-app purchases, Apple in-app purchases, and Apple at that time took 30% of the revenue. Since we are running a marketplace model, if your payment processor is taking 30% of your revenue, this essentially kills it makes it just not viable to run your marketplace. So I knew that on each and every transaction, once we launch, either we would lose money or we would not make any money. But I was hoping that Apple at some point would change it or ease the so-called the regulation. And then I guess we got lucky. COVID happened. Apple went into a more kind of small business friendly mode. So yeah, and then today we do not rely on in-app purchases at all. So yeah, don't worry about the things that you don't have to worry at the moment you're developing your MVP. The fifth thing was that I knew that nobody remembers and nobody cares how many times you launch. I don't remember the time Facebook launched. I don't remember the time Airbnb launched. They launched like three or four times. So I knew I could build something, I could launch, and then if it doesn't work, I can just relaunch in a month or 3 months time. It's totally fine. And then the last thing that I think I got right was that I didn't let myself emotionally attached to the product. I was emotionally attached to the mission and the vision of the company, but I knew the product is just a tool It's just one avenue of the company. So when we launched, I was completely happy eliminating some unnecessary features, or then later on when we were iterating based on customer feedback, we built something on Monday, we tested it out by end of the week, and then by the following like Monday, the feature was gone. And as a technical founder, this is not the typical way of feeling about your product. So yeah, I think just don't get attached emotionally to the product.
Right. So those were the main questions that we had for our interview. So if any of you guys have any questions, feel free to let me know in either of the ways that I mentioned. So that'd be raising your hand or letting me know via the chat. In the meantime, I do have a couple more questions. If you just want to take a second to think about those. Oh, no, we have one over here. So Wayna, hopefully I said that right. I'm gonna unmute you right now and you can ask. Oh, hold on.
Yes, can you please, I think you started talking about this, but can you, I want to understand how you went through the process of launching the product and getting feedback and iterating and improving on and making it better.
Yes, absolutely. The way we launched, we did a soft launch. Basically, we published the app both in the Android store and on the App Store. I think we had a very simple landing page. We made a mistake of not having a landing page pre-launch. Hindsight, we could have built a landing page and start kind of building awareness even before we launched. But yeah, and anyway, so we finally had the apps approved in the App Store. And then in the beginning, we just went through kind of friends and family when it comes to generating demand. But we had to build supply, meaning influencers / like mentors on Mentorcam. And that's where my co-founder played an extremely important role in literally just cold emailing potential influencers. I think when we launched, we had like four influencers on Mentorcam. And the reason we had 4 is because we just had to fill the home screen with like 4 photos. We could not have launched without like 4 influencers. So we really kind of did the absolute bare minimum to so-called launch it. And then we just went manually. We were recruiting mentors via email, manually, talking to them, onboarding it to them, selling the idea of Mentorcam to them via calls. When it comes to generating demand, we were just like sharing Mentorcam on our social channels. We asked friends to share it on their channels. And yeah, and I think we had the first sale, which was a $10 or $20 sale 3 days after we launched. And that was magical. Now, how did we iterate and how did we gather feedback? We reached out to mentees and mentors or people who just signed up to the app but have not purchased anything, like manually. Like we would write a personalized email. We would be tracking anything that we could track. Like let's say you downloaded the app and then you visited influencer A, and then you visited influencer B, and then you visited A again, that then I would see it in the system. So I would make an assumption that you're interested in influencer A. So I would craft an email following up on that idea. I would send an email in a way that you don't necessarily know that I was tracking you, but as if like accidentally, I would have a kind of like a hunch of that's the person you want to talk to. My point is that if you want to gather feedback, talk to them, get them on Zoom, and come up with a personalized, somewhat experience, because everybody loves when their voice is being heard and when they get like a custom and personalized experience.
All right.
Yeah.
Anything more to add or? No. Okay. So yeah, any other questions that come in? We had one person just join. So for that person, just want to let you know, we're doing Q&A right now. If you have a question, you can raise your hand with the reactions button, or you can just let me know via the chat. But yeah, so it seems like we're waiting right now for more to come in, but I have some questions myself. So if you're MVP, oh, is that okay? I see a thumbs up. I'm gonna take that as a hand raise. All right. All right, Masoud, you can go ahead.
Yeah, sorry guys, and I'm late and I was in the meeting for the company. My question is that we call an MVP for this process. Some companies are looking different wording like alpha, beta, and different process. What is the mindset for the back? And are you familiar with this other approach for this style?
To be honest, I'm not, and even MVP, like minimum viable product. Some people started twisting this this name. I personally think you should launch, the mindset should be launching extremely early when you think your product can potentially create some value for your customer. So to me, that's kind of the definition of like that. That's when I want to launch. That's when I want to show it to people, and that's when I want to gather more feedback. Like, does it create like any sort of value? We could call it MVP. We could call it something else, but I think that the essence is there. I'm not sure if I answered your question. Happy to follow up if you have feedback on that.
Yeah, I can totally unmute you again if you have any follow-ups. Okay, but I'm gonna wait a minute because both times I've tried to ask my question, someone's been interested in asking their own.
I was actually wondering how many of you are non-technical or technical founders. Can you guys maybe raise your hands if you're non-technical? Very interesting. So, but most people here are actually technical founders.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So my question.
Yeah.
So if your MVP isn't succeeding, what should you do? What are the indicators? And then what should you do?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of I put this into two categories: succeeding, like in its proper form, succeeding meaning, to me, it comes down to like retention. So if people come and they try your product, but they kind of never come back, I think that's not a good sign. And in that case, the solution to that is talking to them, because instead of you making assumptions of like why, let them tell you the kind of the real reason. Sometimes it's a surprisingly obvious thing to do, but we till today we make this mistake of not validating some of our assumptions by our customers. Now there is, I think, a secondary goal when it comes to launching an MVP, which is just like gathering feedback. So I also consider an MVP a success as long as people are willing to give you feedback, or they are enthusiastic about your product, even though they don't have that much retention. Now, how can you achieve that state? You can do that by stumbling on something that is a big problem for the customer. So they have this big problem, and you've kind of identified it, and then you're trying to give an answer, but your answer today is not that great, but still your customers are like telling you what it is that they want to see. I think this is a huge, that's also like a huge success. Because then at least you know that people have retention when it comes to the problem that you're working on. Anybody has a question?
Yeah, give everyone a sec.
Yeah.
Not, I have more things I can ask.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, well then, oh, no, we have one more.
Yeah, so your first time, did you use code? Did you go no code, or did you actually build your MVP? And what language did you use?
Yeah, everything we did was coded, kind of custom coded. And we went iOS native. We went Android native with Kotlin, and for the backend, we ended up using Firebase which is basically Node.js. I made a big mistake in the beginning of outsourcing my backend to a company, the backend and the Android development. So my thinking was that I'm going to do the planning, the design, and the iOS. And I hired a company to do Android and the backend, and to kind of work simultaneously. But what ended up happening is that the backend was, first of all, to me that was a black box. They used language Ruby on Rails that I had absolutely no experience with, and I was 100% on relying on them when it comes to API endpoints, CMS, etc. That was a big mistake. And then on top of it, the Android that they built was not good enough to launch. So I ended up like, I was going to launch this whole thing 2019 December, and then basically a week before Christmas, I decided to scrape the whole backend and that I would rewrite the whole thing on Firebase and Node.js. And I did that in like, I think I did it in 4 weeks. And then I spent another 6 to 8 weeks cleaning up Android, and then we were like ready to go. But like I mentioned in the beginning, I made a major mistake of not talking to my customers. Had I talked to my customers, I would have learned that they don't need Android. So all that money, effort, headache was so, yeah, it was such a waste of my time.
I see you raised your hand again. If you want to follow up.
Yeah, what made you launch on mobile? Like most, I guess I'm surprised. You could just build a desktop, a website, and not go mobile. But what made you launch a mobile app first, or did you launch? It seems like you launched a mobile app first.
Yes, Yes, my thinking was a mobile first thing because the thinking was that influencers are primarily on their mobile devices, and that the kind of the mini interaction, the interaction of followers DMing influencers. I made the assumption that mostly that happens on mobile devices. So I kind of wanted to stake, I wanted to be where that interaction that I wanted to capitalize on or monetize happens. I think you're right. We could have launched with a website. We could have easily launched with a website to prove some of the main assumptions. Yeah.
Great. Have it back over to Mr.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, Benjamin again. I was going to hire an outsource company for building my product as a coding. So I'm not the technical about the like software, like writing code. I'm just a product designer designing. So I'm learning from you. It's a wrong thing to hire a company. It's expensive, and also it's not the right choice, I guess, right? My question is, it's really necessary to like finding the co-founder? Is a technical co-founder cover the software area? It's that critical or important for you? What do you think?
Yeah. Look, let me rephrase. I made a mistake of hiring a company for something that I could have done. The claim I'm making is not that it's a bad idea to hire a company in general. But let me address your question. I think it's always preferred to find a good co-founder, and it's two reasons. Number one is just running and figuring out the business, and then number two is relying on their skills that the company kind of needs, or the ability to learn new skills in early stages. So my number one recommendation to you is finding a good technical co-founder. But what I did was that I was like, okay, the longer I can go solo, meaning the more progress I can make on my own, the higher the chance I'll have to find an amazing business co-founder. So I was like, okay, I keep building, I keep making progress. I'm scouting for the right co-founder, but because you're kind of the more progress you make, think about it, the more appealing your startup becomes for someone extremely skilled to join.
Yeah.
So I would say it's totally fine for you to hire a company, make progress, but keep in mind that at some point it's the best is to find a good co-founder. When it comes to fundraising, or when it comes to like Y Combinator, VC money, if you're planning to raise funds, it's no investor likes solo founders. It's somewhat like a red flag or an orange flag.
Thank you. Cool. So we had a question come in through the chat from Brendan. Brendan, I can unmute you and you can ask this directly if you want to have a conversation.
So let me read the question. So, would you mind reading the question out loud, Jake?
Yeah. Okay. I'll just read the question out loud. So, what were some of the earliest interactions with your co-founder like when you were getting to know each other? What kind of questions did you ask each other? What are some of the things that you might have done differently? I guess in regards to building that relationship. Yeah.
I would not do anything different. That I'm extremely happy about, but I think I got lucky. I got introduced to my co-founder through a friend of a friend of a friend. And so it was kind of a little bit by chance. But what we have with my co-founder, I would say, is like two things. We have a complementary skill set, but more importantly, we have the motivation. Because in my opinion, you can overcome a lot of difficulties if you have true motivation. Yeah, look, when it comes to finding your co-founder, you better aim for someone better than you. That's the advice I can give you. Now, when it comes to like, how did I know that I want him to be my co-founder? It was easy because he was a man of action. I think we spoke for like 3 times on Zoom, and back then I was living in Asia, and he was like, yeah, okay, why don't I fly down to where you are in Bali, and then why don't we tackle some of the problems, some of the issues, challenges that you have. The next week he flew in, we went to a co-working, we started working together. It was like, okay, give me something. And we had to dispute Apple's App Store app rejection. And we had to write this great dispute of why we think the app should be approved. And then, he just wrote the whole thing in like 30 minutes. And I did not have to, I could have not made it better. So this idea of like, there's a problem, I know I either know the solution or I can figure out the solution. Don't worry about it. Yeah, I mean, to me, it was a delightful experience starting from day 0, I would say. So I to answer your question, aim for someone better than you are, and then start working together, do some mini tasks together, and then I think it will become apparent if the both of you want to work with one another.
All right. Any more questions? I know, Elena, you had your hand up for a bit. I don't know if you had anything more you wanted to ask. If not, I will ask, Benji, what should you do if development is taking ages?
Well, look, if development are taking ages, I think it can be, it's either that you have an extremely challenging kind of technical problem. Yes, but I think most likely it's because you're keeping your feature list bloated. So you might want to cut back on the features that you want to ship or you think that you need to ship. And if you are outsourcing, and if maybe the developer who you hired or the company who you hired, they are not shipping, ask yourself the question if you have the perfect brief. Brief meaning, do you have pixel perfect design with all states and screens and an absolute final copy given to them? Because if the answer to that is no, then you're kind of wasting their time. So yeah, either if you're the one who's building your own product, it must be that your features are too heavy. If you're non-technical founder and you're working with an outsourced partner, make sure you have the absolute perfect brief, perfect pixel perfect design. Now, if it may have also happened that you just didn't pick the right partner to work with, and in that case, I suggest you better run and switch to someone else, because if you have problems early on, you're gonna have more problems later on, because you want to make sure that you can keep iterating on the product based on customer feedback. And that requires a almost a flawless relationship with your with your outsourcing partner or your developer.
All right. So then I guess on that note, how do you go about picking that outsourcing partner?
Yeah, so in my opinion, tech is, because there is all sorts of new modern tech that's coming up. There is a new JavaScript framework every week that's launching, and there are all so many things that we could build like software with. But at the end of the day, I think it's more important to pick the right team or the right developers. And it's, to me, it's like secondary what language or what JavaScript framework they use. Yeah, that's just definitely secondary. If I look back, the best way to verify someone's like or a company's abilities, actually looking at their existing work.
Yeah.
If they cannot show you an example or a product that you feel really strongly about, then probably you should not even give them a chance, because why would you want to finance their learning curve of building something high quality, high value? You don't want, you want to bet on on something that is proven.
Yeah, all right, makes sense. And then my last question, and then we'll see if anyone has any more. If not, we'll wrap up. But how important is an MVP for fundraising? How important is it to investors?
Very, very important, because early stages, you have all these assumptions and you have a mission and vision and etc. But the kind of the only way to prove something which nobody can argue with, in my opinion, is building something and then proving that people think about your product the same way as you're kind of envisioning the future of your company. So like with Mentorcam, I remember I was talking to some investors even before we launched, and I was making this claim of like all the investors, all the VCs, they kind of love the idea of doing something in the influencer space and monetizing DMs. But then when they asked about my go-to-market strategy or my growth strategy, I always just like told them, yeah, don't worry about it. The influencers are going to kind of spread the word. They are going to share their Mentorcam link, and it will just all work itself out. and that's when I got like most of the kind of the bad feedback, not necessarily bad feedback, but that's where they started somewhat like pushing back.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have an MVP that I launched, but the influencers would be doing what I claimed they would be doing. I had no argument. I could not prove. And by the way, they were somewhat right, because then when we had influencers on Mentorcam, there was extremely high reluctance of them promoting their Mentorcam profile.
Yeah. So you'd say very important, but still the go-to-market, the business side is another essential part of it. How would you weigh those two, I guess, one or the other? Is it that the product is of equal importance, or is it of high importance but still not on the level of how are you going to scale?
Look, whatever claim you make when it comes to pitching to investors, you want to make sure that you have proof of backing it up.
Yeah.
Whatever you do, and the proof is always going out and trying it and just making sure that people do what you envisioned them would be doing.
All right, fair enough. Okay, well, I'm all out of my own questions. I'm not sure if anyone has anything left they want to ask. I'll give 1 more minute if you do. If not, we're going to go ahead and wrap up, and I appreciate everyone coming out and joining. So yeah.
I'm actually super curious, like if anybody well, wants to volunteer, I'm super curious, what's your most pressing issue or challenge at the moment? What makes you worry the most?
Oh, here's a question. Sorry.
Yeah.
One came in through the chat from Masood. So I'm planning to quit my job to start my own startup. Would you recommend this approach, or should I continue to work for someone else while developing my startup in my spare time? How is the process handled during the development of Mentorcam?
Yeah, this is a very good question. I think it depends of your personality. I personally, I could not do both. I tried, and I always failed of doing a full time, and then in my spare time building something. This is me personally. I know people who are in early days are even more productive by having a stable kind of full-time job, and then besides that developing something, because it gives them the ability to risk take and not stress so much about their startup. So the path I always choose was 100% focus. It depends, I think, of your personality, and it also depends of your current job, whether if you have a good, stable, somewhat like laid back job that leaves you some energy to stay productive, that's great. If you have a bad job with a bad boss that is draining your energy, or your motivation is extremely low, I think that's going to be very hard to build something amazing simultaneously.
Yeah, and so we got another person who mentioned that the main challenge right now is pricing for the first version that they're going to launch publicly. I don't know if you have any insights for that.
Oh, yeah, the pricing is a constant, somewhat like battle, especially in the beginning. There are, yeah, I mean, we went so-called cheap, and then we kept raising the price, and sometimes it's extremely eye-opening that when you learn that people are willing to pay like double the amount of money for a service that you thought you should price at a certain level. But while asking customers directly how much would they pay, I'm not sure if this is the right way of like figuring this out. I think this is like a test and error. You launch, you price it a certain price for 2 weeks, then you change it again, you increase it, you decrease it. I'm not a big fan of doing A/B tests in early days, because you cannot be 100% sure that the way the users are split into groups are, if they are identical users. So, and by the way, there is a super easy way to find out whether your user base is somewhat like big enough to do A/B tests, and that is that you need to A/B test the same thing, Because if you A/B test the same thing and you see discrepancy between like conversion rate and whatever, then you know your data test is just not big enough. Because there shouldn't be any discrepancy between these numbers if you A/B test the same thing.
Okay. Then we have one more question from Elena. I think it'll be the last one since Benji has a stop at 4.
Yeah, how did you go about getting your first 100, 100 customers, I guess?
Yeah, yes. Yeah, so what we did is that we kept doing mentor recruiting, influencer recruiting through email, and we kind of fine-tuned the targeting to educational influencers, meaning we just got a little smarter of the type of influencers we want to see on Mentorcam. And we in the very beginning, we told them that they need to share their Mentorcam link with their own audience. So in the very early days, our growth strategy purely relied on influencers sharing their own Mentorcam link. Hindsight, I would have spent time, money, effort on building a great product hunt launch with the right video, with everything right, and I would have launched something that could be relevant to the audience of product hunt. Because if I launch let's say a dating advice app on product hunt, but dating advice is not something that product hunt target audience or visitors kind of seek to, okay, I'm kind of leaving some value on the table. So yeah, I would try to go the extra mile, and I would, or at least package it in a way that it is appealing to the target audience of product hunt. And then we did some Instagram and Facebook ads, but these ads were never performing sufficiently, never.
Okay. Well, then I think we're going to close with that. I just want to let you all know I'm going to be sending you an email shortly within the next 24 hours. There's going to be a little promo code in there, so go ahead, make sure you're paying attention for that. And I want to say again, thanks everyone for joining. I hope you got some valuable information out of this. Check out that email. I recommend you checking out the platform, Mentorcam, all the different mentors we have on there. Like I said, Benji is one of them. If you want to get even more information from him, he's accessible via the website. And yeah, I hope you have a good rest of your day, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.